Okay, first up, heads up. For those of you who didn't notice when you clicked on this video, this is a spoiler review. And right out of the gate, I'm going to spoil the end of the show because that's where I want to start this discussion. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. All right, so I think that this image, as soon as I saw it, I didn't do a regular review for this show, not only because the embargo lifted when the show dropped, never a great sign, but also because having only seen the first 3 episodes, I didn't understand what they were trying to do. And because this show is so important to so many people, I really wanted to give Echo the benefit of the doubt. And it wasn't until I saw the final 2 episodes, particularly the final 2 episodes, that I kind of understood what was great about this show and what didn't work and where it made some pretty big mistakes. And so I'm glad I waited, because now I think we can have a more constructive and in some ways positive conversation than we would have if I had reviewed it after just watching the first 3. All right, so I think that, as I said, this image, as soon as I saw it, I knew it perfectly captured the problem. I said we were going to be positive. We're starting out with a problem, but just bear with me. All right, so the problem with the show is it's 2 shows in one. Echo from the Daredevil comics, and then the MCU trying to turn her into a, drastically change the character. I saw so many people on social media saying, why couldn't they leave Echo the way that she was? And I agree with that, especially because you can see that does work in the MCU so well. But the MCU decided, I think with a strong push from the creative people working on the show, that's the downside of hiring people who aren't comic book fans. They get excited about different stuff than what's already excited the fandom about these characters and why they have an audience in the first place. And I wish that the people who made these shows would not have the hubris to feel they could come in here and read and, move everything around. But instead, step back and go, okay, why is this character popular? Why do they have a fan base? And I think that would serve the studio and the brand and the characters much better. We've seen it so many times at this point. But the people involved here said, let's turn Echo into a Native American superhero, that's the headline, to offer up representation as Marvel has so far done with Black Panther, Shang-Chi, Ms. Marvel, Namor, etc. Or now as they pronounce it, Namor, in the MCU at least. But here's the thing. They just introduced an amazing Native American character where that's the headline, and What If with Kahori. I recently asked if maybe Marvel was undercutting both these characters by introducing them less than a month apart and by making Echo, remaking Echo to be similar to Kahori in many ways. And when I first made that statement, of course, you hadn't seen the show. But now I think you can see the similarities that I was referring to, not just the glowing blue light, also in water, so a blue light in water, glowing powers, which sure, even here are a reference to Echo when she hosted the Phoenix Force, but when you look at Echo, that version of Echo, I think you can see an influence on the design for Kahori as well. And then also both characters end up sharing their powers with their, Kahori, the whole tribe, but Echo ends up sharing her powers with other female members of her tribe, her bloodline. So, there's similarities all of a sudden. And if you're going to create these similarities, then why not go all the way and make Kahori part of this bloodline? I mean, the MCU, as we've been talking about, and something they've lost, the connectivity is what really worked for them in their early days. And people are still looking for connectivity. I also saw people on social media, as soon as they saw that blue glowing pool, being like, oh, are we going to loop in Kahori? And it's crazy that we didn't. I mean, I think it would have helped both characters if these were the changes they were going to make to Echo. I'd be like, as long as we're doing this, let's do it. I think that would have been, again, as I said, it would have been beneficial to both characters. Instead of dividing attention, it would have, I think, focused it, which is great, which would have been ideal. But I have to say, what I would have preferred would be because now that I see how well Echo does indeed work in the Daredevil universe when they allow her to be in that, I would have just kept Echo the way she was in the comics, a modern badass who's Native American, and let Kahori handle the more traditional representation. I think that would have been that to me is the way that I would have gone. But if you want to go down this path, You got to link the two. I mean, here, Echo, you see her, she's here in this photo in a Native American version of an MCU costume, which has the same generic look as all the other MCU costumes. Like, I'm like, it broke the spell. They were trying to be really organic, and they're like, here's the costume that you will wear. And you're like, that didn't come from her people. It came from the MCU costume department. It has all the trappings of an MCU costume. I thought it was interesting they gave her a jacket. I was like, wow, this is a real outfit, right? But I kind of like it. The jacket's important because it includes the sun logo, which we'll talk about a little bit more in this video. But then here's this character in this Native American version of an MCU costume holding a handgun, which is very jarring, I think, visually. But then you got rid of the really cool shoulder holsters that she was wearing where she would put that gun. I honestly look at the new costume and I'm like, I think she took that gun actually from somebody else now that I think about it. But I'm like, I really liked the holsters. I thought it was a cool look. And I felt bad that she lost that. And you know what? If you want to have that representation, there were the cool feathers in her hair in the comic. And then also her trademark handprint, which I can't believe she never got. Because they even gave her the origin for that here with her father dying in her arms. You know, he did it in Hawkeye. They replayed it here. Putting his bloody hand on her face, which would be the perfect reason for her to make that her symbol. I loved that. That was a great part of the Echo visualization in the comics. And so to lose that, I don't know why you would. And just like Echo is being pulled in two different directions character-wise, like as character development, but also internally, like within the story, but so is the show overall being pulled in two different directions. It's really two different shows and just 6 episodes. And it's not even a 50-50 split. So no wonder I think it's jarring and feels choppy and doesn't work. So on the one hand, and this is, I liked this part of the story better. I think it's better formulated because it's built off of decades of Marvel storytelling. And the other stuff is new and I think not formulated as well. And, who knows if that's the talent, or if that's, the length, the amount of time the MCU gave them to develop this and create it, or if it was messed up in post. But I think like the smaller part of the story is better than the bigger part of the story. And I think that throws the show's balance off if you were going to force it to be balanced. So Echo is the fantastic character here that she was originally in Daredevil comics, adding fantastic dimension to the hero and the villain of that story. With Daredevil, he's blind, she's deaf, yet neither of them lets that stop them. And I think that if they'd had more time with the two of them, they could have played up that more. And I think they only just a little. I saw some people being like, I'm loving this fight. He's blind, she's deaf. That's incredible. And I'm like, it is incredible, but I don't think they really played that up in the fight. You have to take that away from it yourself. And then with Kingpin, she's in many ways his daughter. The line in episode 4 where she says, violence was always our language. I was like, that's brilliant. Brilliant. And her as a child joining in and kicking that ice cream vendor, and the interpreter being killed because the interpreter knew too much because she'd interpreted all their conversations, and Echo not stopping it. Loved all that. Also, I really liked the points where Echo knew she'd crossed a line and there was no going back. So she had to just keep going forward, which I think is kind of a way you could just describe Echo's very difficult life. But in this case, I'm talking about when she snapped the guy's neck and planting the bomb on Kingpin's train. But you could see that on her face, her knowing that, particularly with the neck snap. That was great acting from Cox. And from an acting perspective, she holds her own with D'Onofrio, which is, I think, also very impressive. Giving Kingpin a character who shares his love of violence, of revenge, allows him to revel in it even more and to talk about it freely and privately. Amazing. And Echo is interesting because deep down, she doesn't want to be like Kingpin, even though she's drawn to that life because she has the same pain, the same, disappointment. And that's what's so great about her in the comics, that she's in this middle point between Daredevil and Kingpin. So that's great. And I think this show really works when they have that. Kingpin, by the way, totally saves his own life. And I wonder if he did it intentionally, because he hands her the same hammer he used to kill his father and says, be like me. Kill me, your father figure. And of course, he knows she doesn't want to be like him. She's struggling with that, so she doesn't kill him. I was like, well played, Kingpin. But she is drawn to violence for many of the same reasons that Kingpin that Kingpin is. And Kingpin points out she didn't stop him from killing anyone, and she has killed for him. Now, speaking of inaction, Echo did not act to stop Kingpin. I thought one nice thing that this show added to this discussion was when Echo tells Henry that it was his inaction that turned her into a monster, that he left her with Kingpin as a child and allowed her to grow up in that environment. And he helped create that pain that made her that way by her family not being there for her, her blood relatives. And I thought that was wonderful, and it's very modern, something that's only, I think, new to a lot of conversations, pop culture, pointing out that inaction makes someone just as culpable as someone who acts. And as I said, she is in the same boat as Henry because she didn't act to save a lot of people and when she was in Kingpin's circle. The crime element of this Echo show is fantastic. The characters in that storyline are the most interesting to me, particularly, I think, because I'm a fan of the Daredevil comics. Kingpin, Daredevil, Henry, I think, fits very well in that world. Even the Mortician. I loved seeing female criminals who are not apologetic for it. This Mortician, Echo, when she says it's time for a queen, I was like, it is time for a queen. I thought her plan was weird, though. I was like, Echo, you don't interact with any of the henchmen. You don't have anyone. How are you going to ensure that this empire transitions to you? How will you know that you will be able to fill the vacuum with the absence of Kingpin? I was like, I love your ambition, Echo, but I think you need to go to crime school or watch more movies and TV. But yeah, that Mortician was great. I thought she was so great. And it was a refreshing change of pace to have criminals going to a mortician for help instead of a veterinarian. Also, a mortician is great because they can better dispose of bodies. I was like, this is a good plan, Henry. Although I can see how it would give Echo the heebie-jeebies. And considering how oddly this show is edited, I feel a lot of maybe this stuff was, particularly the Kingpin and Daredevil stuff, was added in reshoots, I would suspect, because they were like, this doesn't have anything to do with the MCU. And why the ad I'm not sure I think it was a mistake for the ad campaign to focus so heavily on Kingpin and Daredevil, because they're just not in the show. And so why would you set the show up for that kind of to disappoint some people? I just, I don't think a bait and switch benefits anybody. Although I think those are the best elements of the show. Because, that's just how I feel. All right, now, Echo ends up, the show ends up being about having to choose a path, right? Does she go down the path of violence with Kingpin or love and healing? Literally, with her new healing powers. But, by the way, as a child, she saw her mom bring that bird back to life. Why didn't she at least try to see if she could do it for her dad? Because clearly they hadn't thought of that when they did the Hawkeye show. And that just goes to show how, like Star Wars paid a high price for not thinking out the sequel trilogy, not thinking it all the way out. And doing this on the fly here is also becoming a real problem. Anyway, violence with Kingpin. So Kingpin, that's one path with her adopted family, or the love and healing of her bloodline and tribe, right? That's literally, and by the way, the basis of her new powers down the other path. And while I think Echo chose the right path for her mental health, I think she chose the wrong path for her future in the MCU. The perfect example of that is that while Echo has been sold as a character who can fight, that's been the whole selling point. It's been what has really defined the character. And she has some good action scenes here too. In the end, she chooses not to fight and to do some kind of therapy session on the astral plane with Kingpin and to try and heal Kingpin and take away his pain. And that he literally carries with him the hammer that he used to kill his father. But no, Kingpin doesn't do that. He can't give it up. He still needs that pain. It's his source of power. I think he doesn't know who he would be without it, even though I think Echo is in some ways, benefits, even though she has problems and trauma with her family, her original family. That at least gives her a different path. What else is, I guess that's why the end credit scene is so good. A new path opens up to Kingpin. We'll talk about that in a moment. But yeah, he has even more pain because not only has he lost Maya for good, it seems, but she's beaten him. He's lost. And that's a big deal for someone like Kingpin. And so yes, the end credit scene. He sees. To anybody who knows the comics, this is you're like, okay, yeah, of course he becomes mayor. We all know that. But for those of you who don't know, he's sitting on that private jet where I'm like, so he couldn't afford more scenes, huh? They're like, we're going to use this private jet as much as we can. So they have this private jet, and he's sitting there, and he's like all distraught. And on the news, he sees some talking heads saying, "What kind of mayor does New York need? People of New York are angry. They want an outsider." And he's like, that sounds like me, And I thought that was interesting because, and obviously he's going to be the mayor on the upcoming Daredevil show, just like he is in the comics. But when they were talking about that, I was like, wow, this is an opportunity, and we'll see if Marvel has the guts to do it, for a really interesting and honest commentary on Trump's rise to political power. Because a lot of what fueled that, to this day, is also anger. And I just, again, I don't know if Marvel would be willing to do it, but I can clearly see it there, and I think that's fascinating. So before we continue, let's talk Daredevil. One freaking stinking scene! I think it's crazy that they used him to advertise the show when he only has one scene, and even gave out the whole scene to help advertise the show. I'm like, what? Save something for the party, man. The costume looks good, but I gotta tell you, I hate the pants. I hate the ankles of the pants specifically. Why would they be like sweatpants? They should be like a gymnast. I think that's how it should look. But I really love the flippy flips still. I love bringing that element to the character from the comics to the MCU. I thought that was missing from the Netflix version of the character. And some of these shots are just pure perfection. I mean, it's a comic book panel come to life. I didn't feel, though, that Maya held her own against him, as Kingpin said. He's like, oh, you passed the test. None of my other men have been able to hold their own against Daredevil. But I was like, I got the impression Daredevil was going a little easy on her, to be honest with you. What did you think? Not that she's not a skilled fighter, but I didn't think Daredevil was going all out. I mean, he wasn't in it. I think the stakes were higher for Maya than for Daredevil. I think, if anything, maybe Daredevil was testing her. Oh, I guess Maya in the show is very inexperienced at the beginning of it. But again, she still needs to she's not graduated from crime school, because I think she would have realized that. So yeah, the show pulls a bit of a bait and switch, not just in the trailers, but in the show itself, with a strong Daredevil-style first episode, and then she literally leaves New York City. I couldn't believe it when I was watching the show for the first time. I was like, what? It was just incredible to me. And then it does what it really at least the creators of the show really want to do, and that's redefine Echo. Some of you, as I said, might prefer this part of the show, but for me, I didn't find it as compelling, not only because I have come to care about the other version of Echo from the comics, but I just didn't think this was as well thought out as the Kingpin and crime scenes. I think they still had a couple of rewrites to go here. And I think it would have been much more successful to just, I know that some of you won't agree with this, but I think it would have been better to give Echo a major arc in the upcoming Daredevil show, which is supposed to be like 18 episodes. They have the room for it. And I know that some of you might be like, well, why can't Echo be her own character? And why can't she be her own character in her own show? Why does she have to be a supporting in the Daredevil and Kingpin show? And I think it's important to recognize that, Kahori's a lead, Echo might be a supporting. And supporting characters can shine and eventually level up. Look how Scarlet Witch and Loki and Falcon have all leveled up. But it took time. And I think this show rushed leveling Echo up. That's how I feel about it. I think an Echo show maybe should have come after she had an arc in Daredevil. Now, it turns out that the creator of the show also thinks that Echo's powers were lame in the comics. She was like Taskmaster in the comics. She could imitate whatever she saw, from fight moves to any skill. And I liked that. I thought that was cool, because in many ways also she echoes, Kingpin. She echoes him, emotionally and so many ways. And so I think that's cool. But instead, they changed Echo to mean she is a reflection of her ancestors and their abilities. This was also not nailed down enough. Her mother's spirit comes back in episode 5 to fill her all in. The spirit of exposition. So ferocity I didn't quite get some of these things. The ferocity from the first of her people. This opening, by the way, is based on actual Choctaw legend. And I didn't feel the show did a good enough job making that clear to those of us who are unfamiliar with Native American history and lore. I would have liked to have understood this better. And I think if they had maybe more episodes and longer episodes, they could have done that. And also, why did Marvel feel the need to add the supernatural elements to it? Right? Why not just do the Choctaw legend then? Keep it, Echo comes from the Daredevil line of comics, Marvel Knights, that's street level characters. So keep it that way. I think that would have been better. I think that would have worked better with the character and the world that she's in and the expectations of the audience. And by the way, the Choctaw, I was looking into them to cover this show, and they worshipped the sun, which is why that is on Maya's jacket and her shirt and the top layer of her MCU costume that she gets. But the show never even explains that. I had to know it by looking that up, and I think that's crazy. Maybe they mentioned it in Hawkeye, but then I guess they should have replayed that scene. I don't remember them doing that in Hawkeye. 1200 AD in Alabama. That I thought was amazing. I was like, wow. So often today I'm like, boy, the history books do really need to be expanded. I wouldn't say rewritten, but I think there's a lot in there that we're not learning. And I think that's a shame. So again, I was like, why don't we stick around here a little longer and you tell me a little bit more about this? They're like, nope. This ancestor apparently represents strategy, although I don't really feel that these scenes got that across. I was thinking athletic ability, and I think part of the reason that strategy doesn't hit is that they never explained the rules of the game that they're playing. So I don't know if she has good strategy or not. Then with the 1800s and the Light Horsemen, that was, apparently based on Echo's mother's description, cunning, but I was like, I thought it was marksmanship. You made it really clear that it was marksmanship. It was marksmanship, but I guess also cunning. I guess they didn't want to actually say marksmanship because that would be, I can't even think of the right word, but they're like, that's uncool. All right, so anyway, with this though, this also made me be like, where was this Native American police force for Killers of the Flower Moon? I looked it up. I was like, because it bothered me. I was like, why? Because I told you when I reviewed Killers of the Flower Moon, I was like, why, didn't the Native Americans in that story, why would they allow themselves to be victimized? It's an interesting conversation that I don't think that movie had, but you would think some individuals in the community would step forward more than they did, at least the way that movie depicts it. So I loved seeing this. So I looked this up. And by the way, a lot of actors from Killers of the Flower Moon in this show, and also Reservation Dogs. And of course, Graham Greene from all the way back with Dances with Wolves. But again, so I looked up the Light Horsemen, but it turns out they were not only a group from 5 other tribes, not the Osage from Killers of the Flower Moon, but that took place mostly in the 1800s, and Killers of the Flower Moon is the 1920s. But I'm like, wow, why didn't they get the idea for the Light Horsemen or something like that? I thought that was really, really interesting. All right, so what did her grandmother and her mom contribute to the bloodline, by the way? I was like, what do you guys bring to the table? Like the healing powers? And where did the super strength seem to come from? That stuff still was not clear to me by the end of the show. And also, how could Echo transfer those powers? And why didn't her grandmother have them? Because she's in the bloodline. But why would she be able to transfer them to her grandmother? Why did she need to? And then how was she able to transfer them to her cousin? And I will say that doing that, I thought further undercut Echo because it made it less about her and more that all the women of her tribe, or her bloodline at least, are the superheroes. It's not even a story about Echo. It's a story about the women of this tribe, or, even more focused, the bloodline. And again, that gives her similarities to Kahori, where everyone in the group shares the same powers. And I think you were already doing that with Kahori. But I will say, I did like the shot of her with her ancestors beside her. As long as we're going in this direction, I thought that was nice. And I also liked when they did that one movement and they all took turns completing it. I was like, that's cool too. I liked that. But you know what? It's not Echo. Don't take a character that's established and has fans and repurpose it to what interests, as I said, the creators of the show. It's like, that's beautiful, but it is not what Echo is. Go make a new character or something, like they did with Kahori. And as we see in the Kingpin scenes, the Echo from the comics, she does work in the MCU. She didn't need to be changed. She works brilliantly. All right, so let's talk about some of the other aspects of the show. The action scenes, when they have them, are pretty good. Cox, I think, is a solid fighter, but you know what she's even better at? Selling her fighting scenes. That she's excellent at. She would be like, oh, I'm going to kick some ass. And I was like, I think you are. And then she kind of kicked ass. And I was like, I don't care. You got me all hyped up. I'm calling it a win. Who doesn't love a long take action sequence? That was great. But Marvel still doesn't have the hang of R-rated material. I would call their efforts at R-rated material so far adorable. Like when that one guy shot the other guy in the head, Kingpin sends his regards. I was like, you guys are so cute. I think that's funny that you think that's okay like R-rated action. But this episode 1 action scene certainly did have its moments, and excellent music. I like that. Also, switching over to no sound every once in a while to show what these action sequences felt like from Echo's POV, I thought could have been done better, but was effective as it was done. Although when she did that motorcycle through the glass, I don't understand why she didn't use that as a distraction to run away. She just was like, it was just a giant middle finger at the police. And then she just stood there and she was like, yeah, I did it. And maybe she knew Kingpin was coming to get her. But I was like, oh, aren't you going to do something now? Why did you do that? You just added property damage to the rap sheet. But I guess she knew she wasn't getting one. I thought the MacGyver stuff in episode 3 was super cheesy. Did not care for it. I was like, come on. And if you're gonna, again, play by your own rules. If you're gonna do a MacGyver sequence, why don't you show me one of her ancestors who was very MacGyver-y? Like, where'd that skill set come from? I mean, that bothers me. But I liked the big fight that came afterwards at Henry's roller rink, which reminded me of the pizzeria from Five Nights at Freddy's. But going through the wall, still cool, even though they already gave it away in the trailer. Blasting the music, because that, of course, wouldn't affect her. I thought that was great. One of the few times I think they really capitalized on, her being a deaf action hero. And then, wow, when she ripped that video game gun off of the machine and used the connecting cord as a whip, one of the coolest moments on the show. I love that. I wish it had more inventive action choreography like that. Episode-wise, 1 and 4 are my personal favorites. I'm curious what your favorites are. But the editing throughout is choppy, the pacing horribly off, and it's disappointing how short the episodes are towards the end. I mean, I told you I saw 1 and 3 in advance, and I was like, all right, here's 4 and 5. Changed my mind about this show, and to some degree they did. But when I turned them on, I was so disappointed that they were both like under 30 minutes or around 30 minutes. I was like, are you kidding me? The shortest episodes? And I think we all agree that this new trend of cutting in scenes from older projects to catch up viewers who didn't watch those older projects, like the Marvels did as well, is super lame, and trying to pass it off as new material. I'm like, either people watch it or they don't, and then that's on them. I really dislike it. I can't stand it. Finally, Marvel Spotlight. Is it true? Is this a standalone story? Well, you know what? I think that banner says more about Marvel's lack of faith in using this character going forward than it does about the show itself. To me, that banner says, we don't think we're going to use this character again, or at least not for a very long time. And that's due to the choices that the creatives on this show made. They totally changed the character, so now she doesn't really fit in the Daredevil Kingpin universe. And then also they severed her connection to Kingpin. So why would she come back? I mean, she's healed. She's a happy person. Walk away, Echo. I mean, the whole show is about Echo walking away. And so you're like, okay, bye. See ya. Why would you walk away from this? You're a great character in some of these scenes. So that's bizarre. But even though I think her character is kind of complete, I would like her to come back for the Daredevil Kingpin show. You know, the outright Daredevil Kingpin show. Because I like her with those characters. And she never really even got the chance to interact with Daredevil. So I'm like, I'd like her to come back. I'd be happy to see her come back, but I want her to wear the holsters. I love the holsters. And I hope I think that show would give her the handprint. But then how would they explain that? Would you be disappointed if she switched to the holsters and the feathers in her hair and the handprint? I mean, I would be just absolutely thrilled and over the moon if she did that. But she can also wear this costume. I don't care. I'd like her to come back. I would. But then would she still fight someone? Because again, they decide her journey ended in her choosing not to fight. So how would she then choose to fight? Why wouldn't she just always do that triangle thing on people's foreheads and go have a heart to heart with them on the astral plane? But I mean, I want to see her have a rematch with Daredevil. But is she just going to do that to him? I think we'd be all super disappointed if she did. But I don't know if the creators of this show would, and that's maybe why they are not a good fit with the MCU, with comic book material. I mean, you're making a comic book show, whether you like it or not. So what did you think of Echo? Which path would you have preferred to see the character go down? And where do you see her going forward? I'm very curious. And what were your favorite episodes again? And, I'd also like to know where you're coming from. Were you familiar with the character in the comics? Were you like a Daredevil Kingpin fan? Or are you just coming at this as like an overall MCU fan? And I think you'll probably like the changes they made to the character the most if that's where you're coming from. All right, share your... Oh no, it's the dreaded fracturing of the audience. Why? All right, share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.